dare to say, Bror, a good friend of ours in the European Commission. He's been enormously inspirational to Christina and me when we started Marsec Excel, and we started to talk about coaching us through the idea of open source, open innovation, community-driven approach, and the whole idea of how can we, from a relatively small country in the European Union, though with high ambitions, find a way to impact the whole industry. Bror has a long history in research, teaching, starting in Helsinki, continuing in Esprit program. Now he's the advisor to Director General for Information Society and Media. And we welcome you wholeheartedly back to Malta. I learned that you have been here before. Please tell us what you want to share.
Thank you for the kind introduction, and of course my role here is very easy to continue from the previous speeches to carry forward the spirit. I will touch the topic of digital agenda for Europe. How does that support innovation? But believe me, I will not go through the boring slides. Can I have the next one, please? When we look at the keywords all floating around us, many people are using those keywords very, very fluently in their speeches without thinking what is beyond. And I'm very, very glad that these keywords has been opened in the theme of what we are speaking today. It's not about conversion of the tradition to something electronic. It's really fundamentally a question of behavioral change, societal change, building new kind of societal fabrics upon which you can build new kind of entrepreneurship, new kind of growth. And really the change is here and now. And it's very much upon us how we will shape the future and in which pace. And of course, if we by our measures can speed up the change, the inevitable change, then it's perfect. The next one, please. When we look at the internet in more general ICT, it is touching everything, but it's really about a transformative power for both the society and economy, because again, what is really important is that we see them in parallel. As in every technical revolution, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, we had the technology driving industrial change, and that again driving the societal change. That's exactly happening around us now. What is important to notice is that now we are moving from something which has been sequential, rather local, to global. We are moving to something which is parallel both in time and space. And that change, in principle, is more fundamental than any industrial and technical revolution we have had in our mankind. And the question is, how do we really benefit from that by creating new kind of behavioral, societal, business fabric for, in general, well-being and growth? It touches every single area. And of course, as it touches every single area, we need to reflect to what we were hearing about today, smart specialization. What are our niches where we want to be the best, where we want to be the spearheads, and then spread our knowledge further. When looking at the EU policies, we have clearly indicated in the EU 2020 the smart growth, sustainable growth, inclusive growth. But again, they are on that high abstraction level that, okay, what is smart, what is sustainable, what is inclusive? It's really to look at much more intellectually and in depth into the changes, the drivers. I touch more the smart growth part, because again, the digital society, digital agenda for Europe is located there. What does it really mean, the smart growth? From grabbing the structural intellectual capital for our change. Well, you can put the next one, please. When we are looking at the starting point for the digital agenda, you can see our, as we call, wash machine model, where we have identified the problems, I would say the areas where Europe is relatively weak, where we need to improve ourselves. But what is important, when you look at this picture, don't fall into the trap of that picture. Because actually when you read what is written there, it's very, very dark. Like we would come from the darkest past possible, because we are lacking almost everything. What is much more important is that we are looking for what is beyond, what are the opportunities and what are the prerequisites for us to step into full utilization of the futures. So you can see that again the actions of the digital agenda are all creating the prerequisites for the connectivity, for the participation of businesses into the new. And that is how the 101 actions, well, you could say the shopping list of the digital agenda should be read. They are investments in infrastructures, in, well, you could say digital literacy in that way that we are learning as people and also businesses how to navigate in the new society, in the new possibilities. How are we able to create that kind of framework politically and legally, which is enabling the transformative nature of ICT, both in our lives, in our quality of life, and as well businesses. It's really important to see that many of those actions, they are prerequisites for us to transform our societies into the new, desired future. Next one, please. It's not about how many people are connected, how many people are using public services. It's really about thinking about what is beyond that, and that was what was referred to in just the previous speech. How do we create the new services? How do we create the attractiveness? And how do we arrange the back offices, again, to make the full transformation, to use fully the transformative power of ICT? When looking at the digital agenda scoreboard, of course we have measured the accessibility, we have measured how many people are using this and that. We could say very easy indicators. But what is important, again, for political decision makers, for us citizens and for businesses, is to be able to look beyond. What is really changing? It's not just that we are getting, let's say, broadband. It is really how do we build those kind of communities which are sharing value, bringing common additional value to businesses, citizens' lives, we could say society in general. So again, when you see these kind of scoreboards, look beyond. It's not black and white, definitely not. The next one, please. When we are looking again, of course, at the political agenda, we want to have more investment, more research and development investment. We have had the 3% GDP target, but again, as I said, it's so much more beyond that. We need to have the impact of that, and we need to use that not only to, I would say, subsidize everything flat, but really to see where we can make the difference. And that is so true in small economies, and I would say even more true in large ones, because in large ones, even in those you need to specialize. And specializing means also that you do not do everything yourself. And that is, I would say, mentally quite difficult for large countries. So again, when looking at the keywords, we are speaking about SMEs, we are speaking about innovation. Innovation is, sad to say, one of the most misused words today. And actually what is true also is that when we are looking at the transformative nature of ICT, also the nature of SMEs has changed. We have not thought about, for instance, micro multinationals, those which are operating on global platforms are rather small and immediately multinationals. Like very often, for instance, the game manufacturers, well, what is now being done here, we are establishing companies which never existed before because there were no technology possibilities, micro multinationals. Or then we need to look at SMEs where actually we ourselves can be an entrepreneur, where we can be employee, freelancer, employed at the same time. How do we grab that into the societal fabric? And there we are dealing also with, I would say, important country policies. How do you make, and could be a challenge for Malta, how do you make it possible for an individual to have simultaneously all these roles and attracting talent here to, I would say, fulfill the quality of life, inclusive in all those roles, and making the innovation more successful? Because again, innovation is happening only then when things are really happening, when the value offering is meeting the end user. You can have whatever kind of offerings in the air, but it's definitely not an innovation until it meets the customer. So again, what is important, and looking at this open communities, not necessarily only open source, is that we have a different kind of innovation model where you really, due to the complexity of making things happen, you need to create the market at the same time as you are creating the product or service. So again, you have a different kind of interaction between the offering and then the end user. We are clearly moving to user-centric innovation and even user-driven innovation. We are moving more towards open and systemic innovation, where you are creating those kind of frameworks which are enabling this kind of a mashup. And really, I can't skip in the word innovation without experimentation and prototyping. More and more, we need to have the courage to do experimentation, prototyping, coming from research, bringing those results into real-world trials to see what works, what doesn't. Because we cannot do the same mistakes as has happened, for instance, in many public service development, where you have procured a massive system which then is not working. That has happened in many countries, for instance, regarding ID management issues, etc., where you have had tremendous investments for nothing. So again, what is much more better is that you prototype, following again a functional architecture, and see what works, what doesn't. You probably end up with making a lot of small mistakes, but not the fundamental one. So again, what is really important, and that is again an opportunity for a small country or a region, that you are creating an innovation environment where you are allowing those kind of trials and prototyping happening in the real world, and being the spearhead for making innovation happen, for the successes, increasing the success rate and the speed of progress. That requires political courage. It requires courage to admit that you are allowed to fail. We in Europe are very good in planning. We plan perfect for yesterday. And that is not anymore possible when we are looking at the dynamics all around. We need to have the courage to experiment. We need to have the courage to prototype, to stick our neck out. And of course, that's somehow difficult, because if you think about political terms of 4 years, who politician has the courage to say, now we are doing something and I'm taking the risk of failing? It requires a mental societal change as well. And we need to really think about how to get all into the same boat while speaking about the theme today. I think that Europe is a very good place to do those prototyping and experimentation because of our multicultural background. We have incredible richness in that, but we do not have yet the prototyping culture. Because again, when we look at especially ICT and talent, we are now in an era where the talent is fluid. Again, talent attracts talent. So the big question is, how can you make your own area, your smart specialization, but also the geographical area, your, say, citizens involved, into creating those spikes, those areas where talent is attracted to talent, where innovation is more successful, more rapid than anywhere else. How do you attract yourself to be the best place for a certain niche in the world? Because again, you are not limited to not even 400 million European brains. The question is, how do you attract the best brains globally to work for you? Because of course they don't need to move into Malta. It's just that they are available for your own goals. And of course, how do you create that win-win game is also I would say, political decision, because then you need to create the right framework conditions for people to contribute to something in common, and then have the fair share of the profits of the growth globally. It requires entirely new, for instance, IPRs. How do you think about making the IPRs more attractive for this kind of collaboration attractiveness here than anywhere else in the world? There's a good book created by New Club of Paris. Well, you see the website there, nic40.org, which I refer to. In that book, it's clearly shown that the intellectual capital per se on certain topics is not enough for national competitiveness, nor regional competitiveness. What is much more important is the structural capital. How do you make these, you could say, various areas, various disciplines, various actors to interact between each other? And that's the key. When you look at, for instance, some graphs found from that book, when we have a scatter plot of market capital versus process capital of Greece, it is quite interesting to see that well, the optimal situation is right upright. When we look at the development of Greece until roughly year 2000, they were able to maintain the structural capital following the indicators in that book, and also the intellectual capital. Academic research was on good level, but in 2000 something internally happened, and they really started to lose very rapidly their structural capital. The intellectual capital was okay, but really the structural capital, that was the interaction between the various actors necessary to make the innovation happen, was diminished. And you see where it's ended up into 2008, which was the last statistical information we got. And, well, you could say that it seems that it has some predictive nature of the economical situation of the country. And of course, it's easy to look at it from afterwards. But imagine, 10 years ago, we could have predicted based on this scatter plot that something fundamental is happening. We did the same in the New Club of Paris also for instance, Portugal. You see the same pattern. We did it for Germany, where it's, I would say, leaning a bit backwards, not collapsing. But we saw clearly the importance of structural capital, even more important than the absolute, I would say, intellectual capital on certain areas. Again, that is, strongly speaking, advocating for open innovation, a mash-up of disciplines, how to make this interaction of the different actors stronger than anywhere else. So again, it's really about innovating together, and what I would like to stress here is the importance of having all of the actors together to make innovation successful, ranging from the expertise on a certain topic to infrastructures, which is very much for instance, the digital agenda about, and then the citizens, the users, their active participation. It's not just asking what the users want and then go into a laboratory and coming out with the results. No, the users have to be continuously involved in the innovation process. And that's, again, speaking for this open interaction, the mashup. And then coming to the even more important thing, we need to have the right legal and political frameworks to make this happen. Creative Commons tools, IPRs, we need to have expertise, we need to have the trust-building processes so that we can really build cumulative added value. And those projects, those actions which are done in this environment, they have also to give a fair spillover back to the society, back to the, you could say, Creative Commons, so that we can start a continuous growth process. What we are, for instance, doing in our Open Innovation Group now is to look at the new IPRs, or you could say legal frameworks, where we would actually start from only a few principles on the relationship between individual and the society, individual and businesses. Because if we can come with some strong principles, non-negotiable principles, then actually we can get rid of most of the legislation. Thinking about, again, what it means. You today have plenty of restrictions towards new business models based on the historical legislation which was built in the industrialized era. So again, we need to get rid of that ballast. And how do we get rid of it? Well, it's not by creating new laws. It's really about looking at the issues in a different way. We could say that everything is allowed following those guiding principles, and then creating in that way I would say, innovative environment for throwing up your ideas to see if someone can capture them and make a business. Because again, today it's just too difficult to test your ideas in the real market. So again, we need to go beyond what for instance, Jesper has said about open innovation, because for me that model was just a cross-licensing model between organizations. It's not about that. It's about creating that kind of environments where every one of us can be entrepreneur. Every one of us can be also a customer. We should be able to throw our ideas to platforms, environments, for someone else to capture them or ourselves to foster them forward. Again, creating those kind of new entrepreneurship, new kind of growth, new kind of values, which can be turned into the well-being of us. So again, it's about innovation networks, ecosystems, following entirely new principles, the opportunities we have, not I would say the obstacles. Next one, please. Next slide. When we look at what we are doing now, we referred to the Framework Program 7, where ICT is now a bit more than 9 billion. Clearly important. We have, I would say, rather strongly technology-driven activity there. But when we are moving towards the next framework program, the Horizon 2020, we are moving more towards, I would say, separate type of instruments. We are moving towards social challenges-driven research and innovation, technology-driven innovation, and also, you could say, basic technologies-driven innovation, where you are creating the seed for the future. But what is also important to notice here is that just a couple of days ago, the Connecting Europe facility was adopted. And the Connecting Europe facility is something which is building pan-European infrastructures. And we are now, well, the Commission is proposing a bit more than 9 billion for ICT networks. And again here, what is important is not only the fibers, it's also what we think the generic basic services, upon which, again, you can plug in those innovation ecosystems, which are very, very important to have the full transformative nature of ICT. So again, looking at the Horizon 2020, that is more, you could say, the research program and then the Connecting Europe facility, together we are having quite an interesting palette. Our Commissioner, Nelly Cruz, said in her press statement after the adoption that the ICT part will probably stimulate up to 50 to 100 billion investment in ICT networks and basic services throughout Europe. So again, it really will be something which might help you to be one of those spikes of innovation in a selected area, provided that you are building that kind of infrastructure upon it that is easy to plug in the knowledge into the same common goals you are advocating for. Well, I would say nothing new in those important issues. What is clearly the most important thing is innovation. We are having a much more holistic view on innovation, which I'm very grateful for. It's not anymore, in the narrow sense, technical research. What I've often said is that the European innovation system is like a kettle. We public authorities have a role to have the kettle. We have the role of creating the fire, the energy, to make it boil. It can be the societal capital, it can be funding, it can be pre-commercial public procurement to keep everything running. But we cannot say that innovation has to happen in this, that specifically. Our role is to, I would say, politically decide whether we want to have a soup or a goulash, but we do not need to define the ingredients in detail. We just need to take care of that there is a master chef, that is a leader who knows what to do, who is gathering the necessary components, and I would say preferably to do that innovation in real-world settings, well, living labs or equivalent, where we really can have full public-private civic partnership where we really can capture all the ideas into those environments. It's really about making the soup. We do not know, as public civil servants, when it's ready. It's the leader and the industry who is then grabbing out the results. And it's spreading out as welfare. Well, you could say the spillovers are creating more of the creative commons, more of the capital, which can, you could say, be the experience of making even better catering for the future. If you want to have more information about what we are doing in our open innovation part, have a look at our website, openinnovationplatform.eu. I have also brought a set of CDs for you to see what we are doing. They are containing our latest publications, ranging from innovation yearbooks to legal and business aspects on open innovation. Thank you.
Thank you for the very nice remarks. We know that you've been, as I said, been supporting what we're doing here from Malta, and we're really appreciative. We will certainly do our best to generate one of those big spikes from Malta in marine systems and software engineering. Just to give you a very fresh update on what's going on with us, we worked for 3 years with the support of industry, the founding industry members, and the government of Malta to do baseline research in the area and to define MARSA. And up to, we didn't know really what soup we were cooking either, because we didn't know exactly how to launch it in the market. But based on discussions with yourself and other people in the open innovation community, we came up with the idea that we cannot possibly run this from one organization in Malta. We have to come up with a completely new launch strategy, and that's when we went community. This year, on the 14th of February, we actually launched and donated MARSA to the community. So we're hosting it. It's not ours. It's on an open source license. And we got completely shocked. Yesterday, I think we knocked 100 contributors from all continents. We have professors in Hawaii, software developers in Italy, Finnish boat designers and people in the UK designing boats. We have government officials. We have someone in India that we don't really know the designation, but the individual is contributing. We actually have today here the first instantiation printed of MARSA. Has been developed by one of our research engineers with the help of the whole team and the community. It's been reviewed by a German professor and a Japanese professor in Brazil, and it's also supported by the STEPS program from Malta, so it's a kind of a mix of many things. So that's the reference architecture, but that's not the end of it. As you will see on the walls here, we have two ongoing, funded over the National R&I program projects, Marlon and Real Promise. We heard yesterday that it was the first time one organization actually got two projects funded in the same year. And these, you can say, to say it simple, these are apps on MARSA. We have other things going on. We actually, a French open source developer popped up this summer and worked with the team, and he has a ready-to-go infotainment system for super yachts called Sea Vision that is basically ready to be productified. It's beyond research. We're working on berth assist, heads-up displays, all kinds of new things for the yachting industry, all based on MARSA. So that's kind of the effect of what we're doing, and that's the beginning of the spike. It's not the end of it. So it's coffee break time. Please have a look at the wonderful view of Grand Harbor, get some coffee and sweets, and we'll start again on time at 11 o'clock.